Max McLean is a producer and writer who stars in a new film on the life of C.S. Lewis. He's our guest today on Personally Speaking. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Jim Lisante, and Max McLean joins me now. Max is the founder and artistic director of the New York City-based Fellowship for the Performing Arts, which produces theater and film from a Christian worldview. Max stars as C.S. Lewis in the upcoming film, The Most Reluctant Convert, the untold story of C.S. Lewis, premiering nationwide on November 3rd. You can get more information on the film and how to attend by going online to www.cslewismovie.com. He created the role of C.S. Lewis in The Most Reluctant Convert on stage in New York and on a national tour. Among Max's numerous credits he has adapted for the stage include The Screwtape Letters, Mark's Gospel, The Great Divorce, and Martin Luther on Trial. Max is married for 45 years to Sharon, and together they have two daughters, Rachel and Julia. He's here with us today to talk about the mission of the Fellowship for the Performing Arts, his new film, The Most Reluctant Convert, and C.S. Lewis's conversion to the Christian faith. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking, the actor and producer, Max McLean. Max, we had a couple of years ago a young actor on who was thrilled that he was going to do a part of Adam in the story of Adam and Eve in the wonderful Paradise Lost, your production. And I mentioned that because I was so surprised that something with a Christian worldview would find its way to Broadway. Then I realized we'd had Daniel Gerald on, and you'd already, again, through him, been telling the story of C.S. Lewis. What I want to start with is when you have shows on Broadway, off-Broadway as well, what's the reaction to the Broadway community? What's the reaction to the theater community? And I mentioned that in the context of Kelly O'Hara, the wonderful actress, and Veronica Clark, another great actress, both very pretty dedicated to their Christian faith, have said that they feel like outsiders sometimes in the theater community because people are not mainstream Christians by and large, and so treat them with a certain strangeness. Do you find a warm welcome in the theater community?
We're a bit of oddballs because we produce from a Christian worldview. Unlike Kelly and Veronica, they have to decide what shows they're going to do. Mm-hmm. We create the shows, and we come from a Christian worldview perspective, so that's baked in, and we hire the best talent that we can to do the shows that we do. I think the actors want a really good script that deals with provocative subjects, and I think we provide that. Designers want challenging projects to design. So in that regard, we're very well received. We pay well, we put on good shows. Mm-hmm. They like to invite their friends. The messaging of the shows sometimes raises eyebrows. Mm-hmm. So that I remember there was when we did the Screwtape Letters, this an artistic director from a regional theater came and saw the show, and he said, "It's shocking to see this kind of moral perspective in New York. It's just not seen. It's a little uncomfortable," and I get that. However, having said that, Screwtape ran for 9 months at the West Side Theater. The Most Reluctant Convert, Lewis's journey from atheism to faith in Christ, ran for 15 weeks at Theater Row. Mm-hmm. So what is happening? I think we're filling a niche.
Okay. And the people coming, Max,
missing in New York. Yeah.
The people coming are not just believers. You're reaching an audience of people, perhaps.
Oh, we try to. I mean, we invite everybody.
Okay.
So whether they come or not, theater is very self-selective.
Yeah, right.
And I do think that if people have an interest in a very strong, what's the word I'm trying to look for? A very robust expression of spirituality that's not soft, and you have to make choices. You have to be on one side or the other, and so some people like that, some people don't.
Yeah. I'm hoping you're pulling in those folks who are on the margin, because it would be an eye-opening and a mind-opening and a soul-opening experience for them all. I want to go back to something that intrigues me in my own background. I was introduced to the works of Evil and Wild by Mr. Kevin Cronin, my high school English teacher, and fell in love with A Brideshead Revisited. You obviously have a deep dedication to the writings and the works of C.S. Lewis.
I do.
Who introduced you to him?
Well, actually, my girlfriend, who is now my wife, gave me a copy of Surprised by Joy, which is Lewis's autobiography. I had just recently had a conversion experience, and so I was pretty sensitive to things like that. I remember reading it and thinking, this guy's really smart, but I don't think I understand a word he's saying. So she said, well, try this one. And that was the Screw Tape Letters. Mm-hmm. And from page one, I said, oh, I know this guy. I know this guy. It was very clear. But it's the idea of the spiritual realm and how it imposes itself on our realm. In Lewis's case, he's constantly referencing spiritual warfare. And even in Brideshead, Brideshead was a little bit more subtle than Lewis. But the idea of God's grace, even at the end, was so compelling. Yeah. And I thought the original BBC version of it was so much more true and real than the more recent film version of it.
No, it was. It's worth the 11 hours just to catch the full flavor. One of the first guests we ever had on a show like this many years ago was the film director, Frank Capra. And he talked about making It's a Wonderful Life and any number of other films. But he said what I was intrigued by was that he actually, during the shooting of these films that he makes, would pray for the actors to find the right tone, the right approach, the truth of what they were saying. You're busy directing, producing, writing. Do you pray while you're working, Max?
I do pray. I don't pray enough, but prayer is very important. And I ask people to pray for me. In fact, I have a prayer team that I communicate, because I find that I communicate my prayers better when I write them out. And we do pray for our actors. I think your comment reminds me that, Frank Capra did it, and I should do it more often. But I do think, it is, the spiritual reality has to be nurtured. And I think that we, when people are interacting with our plays, interacting with the work of C.S. Lewis, they're hitting a reality they don't hit anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And so it is our responsibility to nurture that reality, because once they leave us, they're, unless the Holy Spirit touches them. And of course, that's a big part of what we do, is to allow the Holy Spirit to do his work. It's not our work, it's his work. Right. And if, one of the actors this weekend was telling me, we're doing a tour of The Great Divorce. And one of the actors was telling me that he's just been blown away by Lewis's That Hideous Strength. He's reading that, and he just already read the other two space trilogies, but found the third one, first one being Out of the Silent Planet, the second one, Paralandra, the third, That Hideous Strength, and found the third one just overwhelming. And I said, praise the Lord.
Now you've taken this wonderful play that you had on the stage, The Most Reluctant Convert, and you've made a film of it. Both in the clip that I saw of it, the extended clip, and of course, having seen it too on stage, he dealt with amazing disappointment, heartbreak, loss of people he loved. Most of us go through that. A lot of people, though, that is the final turnoff from anything spiritual. Any good God who would allow such things to happen. Why did he turn from the horrors of his life to being a believer? Or how did he do it?
Yeah, well, that's the whole story. It was a long journey in his case. As you referenced there, he lost his mother to cancer as a child. He had a terrible relation with his father. he saw the brutality of World War I, which he called the hell where youth and laughter go. So he had a pretty pessimistic worldview.
Yeah.
And he came to the conclusion that either there's no God behind the universe, a God who's indifferent to good and evil, or worse, an evil God.
Wow.
And so, and so that had to be chipped away. But the way it was chipped away was he had a perspective, and he asked a wonderful question. He says, if there's no straight line elsewhere, why do we call nature's line crooked? And so he was, there's a sense of why am I complaining?
Mm-hmm.
Because we must have some sort of expectation of good. That good is the baseline of the universe. So where does that come from? So that got him to thinking, and then he also had these incredible experiences of desire, which usually come out of beauty, of some point of beauty, whether it be music or a vision or a landscape, and they would give him this sense of longing, this desire, which he called joy. And he wanted to know where that came from because he kept looking for it. That was his goal, was to find joy. And he said he became a scholar at looking at it. But then he realized, and he was looking at the sensation of it and not looking at the object of it, because it was pointing to an object.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that object is God. And that was the ultimate thing that pushed him toward first God, first kind of a Platonist God, then sort of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and finally he came to terms with Jesus Christ.
Years ago, Max, I had seen on Broadway the original production of Shadowlands, and I was very touched by it. But when they made it into a movie, I remember Father Robert Lauder, who does film review, said he was saddened that so much of the God focus of Shadowlands had been removed and watered down, and he presumed it was because as a Hollywood picture now, starring Anthony Hopkins, it had to be broader in its appeal, which meant it lost some of its God power. You've now taken a play and made it a movie. Were you pressured at all to reduce the spiritual part of it?
No, because we're the producer. That's
right.
and that's really the challenge. But that that's a kind of a spiritual warfare right there. That's a powers and principality notion that boy, that's too uncomfortable. Let's not go there.
Right.
That's kind of it's a kind of a Lucifer thing. All these things I'll give you if you'll bow down and worship me.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, I doubt very much that Anthony Hopkins and Deborah Winger would have fought that. I do think it probably came from the studio level, and the sense of there's not a big enough audience for this.
Mm-hmm.
I still personally think that the spiritual element came through, not to the degree it should have, but I think any success that film had. And the film, by the way, is very interesting because it doesn't age well, that film. I remember seeing it and I thought it was quite beautiful. And I didn't know Lewis very well at that time, though I respected him. But seeing it more recently, I thought, oh, this film doesn't age well.
That's interesting. I have to go back and look too, and compare with what Max puts on stage. Now, I have to ask you this because it's intriguing to me that you were introduced to C.S. Lewis by the girlfriend who became your wife. And for those who don't know, Max McLean and Sharon have been together for over 45 years. Every weekend, I get to do weddings, and so that I don't give some generic talk on love and marriage, I ask the couple to write me an essay on why is this the one of the billions out there that you think you can build a life with. Had you been asked to do that 45 years ago, why was Sharon absolutely the one for you?
Well, she was a hard-headed woman. And that's what I needed. I was floundering and she wasn't. And I needed that structure. And I mean, it brought me to Christ. She was an instrument, but there was a lot of things that were floating around at that time. It was almost like this way goes nowhere, this way goes nowhere. That's the way to go. And she was part of that road, and really has been. That's one of the. I'm talking to a priest here, but that's one of the great things about marriage is, it's you have to to smooth out those rough edges.
Yeah. Could you two have made it through 45 years if you didn't share faith?
I think that would have been much harder.
Yeah.
Because there's like, wandering desires. Uh, uh, I'm so mindful. You watch shows, you watch films, etc. And most of the time, the way love is expressed is this emotion, this desire, and most adults know that that's a very small phase of it, and that will, if you follow your quote unquote desires, particularly if your desires are disordered, they're going to lead you down the road to hell, and they have, so in many ways we have to tame our desires, and certainly marriage does that. That's one of the reasons why we have to worship. That's one of the reasons why I read Lewis, I read books, is my natural self is always being moved in a direction that's not right. The difference is that when you constantly have the Holy Spirit or your conscience guiding you, it's wrong, right?
Yeah.
But when you don't know it's wrong, so you just go with it.
Right. An occupational hazard of someone in the priesthood, actually anyone in any kind of religious work, is that we're always doing godly work, but making time to just be present and allow him to be God is not something all of us do. It was Fulton Sheen who said years ago that any priest who's not doing a holy hour is going to lose himself, and there's some truth in that. I mention that because you're very similar. Your ministry, your work is godly work at every level of theater and movies. How about yourself? Are you able to make the time, to carve out the time? We had recently on that guy Dallas Jenkins, who's behind The Chosen, which is so popular, and he fights the good fight. He said, I'm doing God's work, but I got to make time to actually be in God's presence and listen. Right. It's an occupational hazard of the work we all do. How does Max McLean?
It's always a challenge. I read something on Lewis that I'm writing a play, and I actually put it in because it's a reminder to me. I'm paraphrasing it now, but it's like I worry. He says that I worry so about defending Christianity that I spend so little time with Christ himself. Wow. And then he said, "Oh, it is a subtle snare." Yeah. It is a subtle snare. But I do think, that this is the world that we are put into. It's this, it's not a perfect world. It's not, one of the great things about Lewis and Space Trilogy, he calls, in his, when you read other alien movies, it's always the aliens are the bad guys and we're the good guys here on Earth. In his interplanetary novels, we're the bad guys. Yeah. Everybody is in harmony with the spheres. And we are the bent planet, and because we're the ones that rebelled, and it needs to be redeemed. And so, I think what you're describing, we're always going to have that challenge. Redemption and sanctification is such a long process, and we fight it tooth and nail. Following our conscience is really hard. That's the subject of our play, The Great Divorce. That following our conscience is we'd rather live in hell than do the thing that'll get us into heaven. And Lewis says that the doors of hell are locked from the inside.
Max McLean is our guest, and I want to, for our listeners and viewers around the world, in cinemas nationwide, November 3rd, one night only, is The Most Reluctant Convert, the subtitle, The Untold Story of C.S. Lewis. Tell us a little bit about that, Max. How should folks be part of that celebration on November 3rd?
Well, please go to our website, cslewismovie.com. Get to watch our trailer. We're a theater company. We're not a movie company. So the movie theaters have a little bit suspicious, not suspicious, but skeptical of our ability to draw an audience. I'm happy to say ticket sales are going fast. There's a lot of advanced sales. They're adding shows. I think we're at 300 theaters around the country and growing. They're adding shows, so people are really finding the film, and people like you are helping us to get the word out. The film is a very honest take at a redemption story of somebody who
Yes.
really fought Christianity at a very deep level, was a vigorous debunker of the faith, and finally, he said, the most reluctant convert in all of England. And not only that, then he becomes C.S. Lewis. I mean, when he was converted, it wasn't obvious he would become what he became.
Mhm.
Probably the most respected, influential Christian writer of the 20th century. But that's what God can do.
Max McLean is our guest. Max, going back to you for a moment, big into family of origin. You chose a life in the arts. I'm just
Yes.
wondering, the family that you came from, did they see that as a good idea or as a very risky business?
Oh, they saw it as very risky business. Yeah. I was on a law track and in college, and then I had a sort of a degree, a pathology of sociophobia, fear of being in front of people. And so the
Mm.
way I thought to overcome that was to go to the weird part of campus and take an oral interpretation class. And that's when the bug bit. And so what I found was that I really wanted to communicate something, but
Hmm.
of significance. And so, I was introduced to Shakespeare, to Shaw, to Williams, to Arthur Miller, and I just fell in love with these writers and what they had to say and how they said it. And so I just wanted to be in that world. And
Hmm.
it was and then all of a sudden, when I really started taking Christianity seriously, I said, well, why not use the skills and techniques I developed in the theater and apply it to the scriptures? And so that's where this whole phase emerged later.
Hmm. Some years ago, I had the opportunity to be at a dinner with Rex Reed, the critic, and I said, "Let's do a program, on religious films." And he said, "Why bother?" He said, "They're tedious, they're predictable, they're usually stilted and badly made." And he's not entirely wrong, but what is it you hope that the reluctant convert will do to make people realize that a so-called religious or spiritual film can also be arresting to watch?
Well, we do have to overcome those stigmas that Rex Reed just mentioned, and that's one of the things we want to do is overcome those stigmas
Hmm.
by telling a compelling story about a man who you would not expect. I mean, he was a very proud man, very smart man. He was he sucked the air out of the room when he came in. He was just the biggest personality in the room, and for him to humble himself and to really fight the good fight from the position he came from is very compelling to a lot of people, particularly people that have been successful.
Hmm.
People realize that success sometimes breeds a level of emptiness because you've climbed the mountain and you see that there's another mountain to climb. And all of a sudden, it just feels like Sisyphus a little bit. So, uh, I do think that to know that as Lewis says, if you find in yourself a desire that no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is we come from another world.
Hmm.
And so, I think to plant that seed would be a huge win for us.
Yeah. Max McLean is playing C.S. Lewis in this film in the mature version, the earlier by Nicholas Ralph, the wonderful young actor from All Creatures, Great and Small. How in the world did he come to be associated with this particular enterprise? He is certainly an up and coming, amazing
Yeah,
talent. When I look at him, I think of a young Ian Charleston. But how did he
I
come
do
to you?
too. I do
Yeah,
too.
very
Yeah,
similar.
yeah.
How did he
We
come to?
found him actually. It was pretty late in the game. We had offered that role to someone else that declined kind of late, and then Norman Stone, our director, his wife saw the first episode of All Creatures in England, which was like last July, a year ago July, and she told her husband, "Check this guy out," and so she liked him on seeing All Creatures. So got in touch with his agent. He was just finishing a movie in Bulgaria, and season 2 of All Creatures had not been picked up yet, so he was free.
Max McLean, thank you for being with us. And because I know we did this before earlier in the show, but I want our listeners and viewers not to miss November 3rd. And by the way, in addition to going to theaters that day to watch the film, for folks, for whatever reason, who don't on November 3rd, is it going to be streamed? People like my mom?
I think we'll probably have some video on demand later,
Okay.
but we're contractually obligated not to, because of, if you're going to be in movies, then you can't compete. So
Okay.
that's probably going to be in 2022 to do that. And there's good possibility that the theaters may give us an encore production, because we are selling well.
Okay.
So that seems to be the direction that is heading. But I mean, eventually, yes, because that's where, all cinema, the challenge for an independent producer like us, a film like this costs, quite a bit of money.
Right.
And if you're giving it to like Netflix, they'll give you a very small amount of money, and then they distribute it, and you can't make any more movies. So so you want to do that at the end of the line, not at the beginning.
And Max, for people like my 101-year-old mother who loves DVDs, will it eventually come out in DVD format?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh,
in
good,
fact,
good,
we're trying to see if we can get DVDs out soon.
Okay,
yeah, I mean, I agree with you. That we want to make it available to everyone. It's just sort of the in due time.
Yeah.
Of course, your mom's 101 years old, so she doesn't have a lot of time.
Max, she may outlive you and me. I'm not sure. Max McLean, thank you for all that you're doing, for your witness to the film, for your dedication to C.S. Lewis, and most importantly, for your dedication to the Lord. Thank you so much for being with us.
Delighted to be with you. Thank you.
As we end today's program, I want to thank you all for being with us. If you'd like to be in touch, go to personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also listen to Personally Speaking Podcast on YouTube by searching under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. And please don't forget to click like and subscribe. Personally Speaking is also available as a podcast on personallyspeakingpodcast.buzzsprout.com. Or you can go to www.closeencountertv.com or go to www.ollmp.org. And all of them have some of our past shows and our current shows as well. Personally Speaking is also now on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. We're also on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.